Yawning. Are you tired of me already?
Yeah.
Wow. I haven't even started talking yet. Barely.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And this week we're discussing chapter 41, The Scribe, the last chapter of Assassin's Quest.
Yeah, we're done. Woo!
So this, I guess, I don't think you can call it an epigraph because it's just Fitz writing this.
Well, it's done in the same style as all the other epigraphs.
True.
So
True.
I guess it technically is an epigraph. It's just the most direct from epigraph into content of the chapter.
True. And it's speaking on the cycle of war between the Out Islanders and Six Duchies. It starts out with how forging was not an invention of the Red Ships, and we had taught it to them from King Wisdom's days. We've talked about this in the past few episodes as well, where that is the rage and the reason that, at least the foremost stated reason to go to war with the Six Duchies was to get revenge on them and to do what the Six Duchies had done to their people, to the Six Duchies people.
Right. And the way they figured it out was by having scholars of their own study and research what had happened and what the correlation was with the people losing their memories and becoming horrible to their own family members. It's really interesting because there is a comment in there that even though the Six Duchies people view Out Islanders as barbaric and barbarians, they do still have scholars of their own that study. And that made me giggle because, as we all know, Bingtown sees the Six Duchies as barbaric because they don't have glass in their windows.
Right.
And so it's like
Which
funny.
I think we also proved is not a real thing as well, because they do have glass.
Some places have glass. I think it's just more widespread in Bingtown or something. I don't know. But either way, I just thought it was really funny to see the parallels of like when you have it a little bit better off than a different society or what you deem to be better traits, you see everyone else as barbaric, and yet they still can be smart.
It also mentions here that Fitz suspects that copies of the skill scrolls that were Solicities made their way into the hands of Out Islander traders who had the coin for them. And this is because it's written before 20-man Trilogy. It's before we get to the actual island of Aslevjal and see that they do have stockpiled a lot of scrolls and some originals as well.
Right.
So obviously they were sold off during this war.
It does specifically say that the theory is that they would have had to be sold off before the Red Ship raids started.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting and something I don't think I've really thought about before timeline-wise, because what would be the motivation to selling the scrolls in the first place? Like, why would Galen or Queen Desire or Regal need the money? If that, like, I assume that's what it was for.
I mean, working out a long-term plan for revenge.
I guess.
Obviously, they were kind of partnered up with the Out Island Raiders.
In some capacity,
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, at least.
I guess, like, I've always been under the assumption of they knew the plan was to forge people of the Six Duchies, and they're okay with that. I just never thought a little bit harder about it of, like, did they know that forging was a capability before they sold the scrolls? Like, do you think the Pale Woman came to them with the idea of, here we have a way to get revenge on your father? I guess she probably wouldn't have showed up. It would have been Kebble Rawbread, because I can't imagine that they would have taken kindly to a pale woman I don't know, she'd be too different.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know. It just made me wonder about the original reason to sell the scrolls. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes more sense as the time goes on. It just, I don't know. What made them think, yeah, let's do it?
More power in some way, making connections with the supposed Farseer enemies, you know?
Right.
Any sort of backhanded things you can imagine.
I suppose. Well, either way, they did get the scrolls, and Fitz seems to think that they might not have been able to figure out what to do without the scrolls, but they did find out, and with the melting of the glaciers, they found some stones of their own, as well as a sleeping black stone dragon. And I wanted to ask, do you think this is an actual dragon of ice fire? Because I believe
No.
he's described black, right?
He is, yeah. No, this is on that island, though. When they pull up, there's on the shores of the island, there is multiple blocks put together and started to be carved, as they describe it. And
Right.
then he goes in, and there is the actual stone dragon that they're working on. So I'm assuming it's that first described one that's on the shores of the island.
I guess the way I read it made it seem like it's finished.
Well, obviously it wasn't finished, but yeah.
Why do you say obviously? It could have been finished.
And risen up as a skill dragon? You think so?
It could have rested there after being a skill dragon. I don't know.
I suppose it's possible, but I don't remember any descriptions of a finely detailed and non-weathered statue of a dragon.
Right. Neither do I. That's why I was wondering if maybe it's actually ice fire. They just thought it's a stone dragon.
No, they knew about Icefire long before this, because there's been stories of seeing
Right.
him through the ice,
Right.
and the ice is building around him, not receding away from him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's Icefire at all.
Okay.
So they pooled all their knowledge of the wise men with the context clues of their found skill stones, plus the carved or partially carved or what have you, kind of put them together and said, oh, hey, this is how we can get revenge. This is what happened. And Fitz goes on to relate that only one white ship was driven ashore by the Elderlings when they cleansed Buck. Remember in the previous chapter that 2 total were sunk.
Yes.
So only one was like intact when they fully defeated it. And the dragons devoured all her crew down to the last man. In her hold were found only great blocks of shining black stone. Locked within them, I believe, were the stolen lives and feelings of the folk of the 6 duchies who had been forged. Their studies had led the Out-Islander scholars to believe that stones sufficiently imbued with life force could be fashioned into dragons to serve the Out-Islanders. It is chilling to think how close they came to discovering the complete truth of creating a dragon. It is true that they got kind of close, but it's also just slightly out of alignment enough that it's like this would never have really worked.
Right.
Because it was just solid black stones that they were feeding lives into and they were going to fashion afterwards. It's not willing. It's, there's a lot of different inconsistencies with this. And eventually they do make it work with Illustor shoving Kebalrobred into it, which is probably like sufficient skill as well.
Right.
Shoved into that dragon and makes it live. But these blocks in the holdings or the holds of the white ships, I don't think would have ever worked out.
Yeah, I think the whole deal with these stone dragons, it seems like the purpose is that you have to be one. It's a one coterie, one-minded thing. And I don't see how it would work if it's millions or thousands, hundreds of thousands of people unwillingly put in there, disjointed, not having the same goal in mind. I don't know. I feel like there'd be too much fear in that dragon for it to work well if it did raise off the ground.
There's no overall leader of that group.
Right.
to direct it once it is risen either. So, yeah. And so Fitz, who's writing this, remarks upon the circles of violence here. The raiders came to our shores. King Wisdom went to the Elderlings, carved dragons, drove them back, and forged their people. Years later, the Red Ship Raiders figure out how to forge people, come back to our shores for revenge. King Verity goes, gets the Elderlings, drives people back from their shores, flies over their islands, and probably forges people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he kind of trails off, because that kind of hatred can fester, and he's just like, well, some things just don't need to be written down.
Right.
And we get old man Fitz.
Right. Quote unquote old.
Yeah, he's 30 years old in this.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind while we go through. He is 30 years old. He sets his quill aside, rises up, and goes to the hearth to throw this scroll on the fire, as he normally does.
Right. Which is a thing that Fitz does for the rest of his life. Anytime he writes down, he tosses most of it into the fire.
Yep, he does save some. He does give some to Chade, or sends it along with Starling, I guess, who gives it to Chade. But it's kind of implicitly agreed upon that they don't say his name.
Yes. It is a pattern that he continues, and I think very Fitz of him, that he just doesn't think it's good enough, and there's too much personality in it, so he throws it away. He also talks here about how it's getting a little bit colder at whatever time period this is, so it's probably fall, early winter, and it's pulling at his scars, his shoulder scar worst of all, and just how he's feeling really old now with all the how bad he feels whenever it gets cold.
Mm-hmm. He remarks upon stepping over Nighteyes to get to the hearth, and how Nighteyes' muzzle is graying, and his bones do not like this weather any more than mine do. You are getting fat. All you do anymore is lie by the hearth and bake your brains. Why don't you go hunting? He stretches and sighs. Go bother the boy instead of me. The fire needs more wood. He's living a good life.
Oh, yeah. As he deserves, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
And before they can call the boy in, Hap, he comes in, and it was probably brought in by the scent of the burning vellum of the scrolls, and is frustrated with Fitz because good ink and scrolls are really expensive, and doesn't he know that he could have just called Hap to get more wood, which seems like Hap hasn't really understood the process of Fitz throwing things in the fire yet.
Yeah.
But he is there, and Fitz doesn't really respond to Hap, which I think is really interesting, that Hap is talking to Fitz, but Fitz notably says, I made no reply.
I thought the characterization of Hap in this scene was very odd. He seems like a 13, 14-year-old, and he's 9 going on 10.
Yeah.
Actually, like, it just seems a little bit too verbose, worrying about price and cost of things, just sighing and shaking your head, oh, Fitz, and walking out and doing the chores anyways. I don't know. Obviously, he's gone through trauma, and he could be grown beyond, like, more advanced in his years, sure, but he's still a 9-year-old. Like, it just seemed, the characterization to me just seemed a little bit off.
Right. I guess I'm okay with it because this is like, it's like olden times-y, and I feel like back in the day before child labor laws, children probably weren't as like childlike at age 9 as they are now, just based off the fact that they would have had to like work to survive. So I don't know. It is a little strange, but I can write it off in my own reading of it.
Mm-hmm. And Fitz goes into reminiscing, telling us, the readers, about how he got Hap, Miss Hap, and how Starling brought him one day. She visits maybe twice, maybe thrice a year to stay with him, rebukes him for his hermit ways, and one day brought a boy.
Yeah.
And just kind of announces it. Hey, I brought you a boy.
Yes. And this was 2 years ago, according to Fitz.
Yes.
And Fitz, immediately upon seeing Hap, assumes that this is their child together. And it takes a few indirect questions for Starling to realize that's what Fitz thinks, and tells him, my child? No. Yours? Maybe, if you were in the area almost 8 years ago, you know?
When I read this, I actually remembered that we spoke incorrectly about Hap
Yes.
before. We said he was from the Forge area, and I said, I think that's also where Fitz put up his cabin. No, Fitz's cabin is by the Forge area, but Hap is from Flounder Cove. I don't exactly know where that is, but it is not by Forge.
No.
Or at least not directly by Forge. So, little correction there.
Yes. And poor Hap was found eating rotten vegetables out of a garbage because his mother had died and his aunt did not want to take care of him.
And his sister. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah. His aunt. I read that the first time around as his sister wouldn't want to take care of him. Which I'm like, that's
fair. No, it's his aunt. It's another adult.
Yes. Yeah, his mom named him Mishap.
Right. And
two different colored eyes.
Yes. And it says that he was demon gotten because of the two different colored eyes. Because there's no mention of a father, it's also assumed that this is potentially a result of a raider's baby. We don't know that for sure.
Possible. It's definitely possible. It would have been, let me see. Fitz is 30 here. I don't think so. Because Fitz is 30 here. And Hap is almost 10. So let's say 10 and some change years ago he was conceived.
Right.
At the end of Assassin's Quest, Fitz is 19. That's 11 years difference. So it would have to be like literally the last village they left or something like that would be my guess that the raiders left. So I feel like it's a high chance it's not raiders, but it potentially could be still.
Yeah, I don't know.
I interpreted the demon gotten quote as like he has two different colored eyes. This is superstition.
Right.
Like folk kind of.
Yeah, no, definitely could be that.
Yeah. That's how I interpreted it at first, but I don't know. The timeline almost matches up where it could be Raider, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. It could also be a Forged One's child. We really don't know anything about his dad.
Right, yeah.
It's not mentioned at all. So, so that's just me making guesses and theories. However, he is alone. And even though he's named Mishap, I assume his mom took care of him for the 8 years. I mean, he's still alive. Even, I guess, just because someone is alive doesn't mean that they were taken care of well. Fitz can attest to that. But yeah, definitely sad that obviously Hap has come from a situation that was not so great. And to lighten the mood, Starling does say that it does sound like it could be his child because it is a demon-gotten bastard.
Yeah.
so that does fit Fitz's MO. But Hap seems to be a good fit for Fitz.
Yeah. Yeah, he says that he's good with a bow. Nighteyes approves of him. Hunts well for the old wolf. And that Fitz calls him boy as often as not, and Hap doesn't seem to mind.
Right.
And it kind of moves on to Starling's visits overall. And that when she comes, she brings news, some that he doesn't care to hear, some that he does like to hear. And he gives us a recap of the people that we know from the story. Lady Patience is ruling at Tradeford. She's turned the King's Circle into a garden. And the interduchies are making more paper, or as much paper as rope.
Yes, out of hemp.
Yep. Beric and Molly and their children are well. They have Nettle and Little Chivalry and another on the way. Molly tends her hives and candle shop while Beric has used stud fees from Ruddy and Ruddy's colt to begin to breed horses again. Starling knows these things, for it was she who tracked them down and saw to it that Ruddy and Sooty's colt were given over to him. Sooty did not make it from the mountains, being too old to survive the journey. And both of them still believe that Fitz is dead. That was a task, if you remember, that he tasked the fool with.
Yes.
So like, hey, make sure Byrrc has these. So obviously Starling took care of that, which is nice to see.
Yes.
Kettrican bore her son, Prince Dutiful. Starling told me he has his father's coloring, but looks as if he will be a tall, slender man, like Kettrican's brother Rurisk, perhaps. Which I made note of because Fitz has chivalry's height, and Verity was not a tall man.
Yes. Yeah. I do also wonder if this is because Fitz is part mountain.
Yeah, I would assume
mountain
so.
bred. I don't.
Yeah.
Mountain born. I don't know. That those traits would be extra secure in someone from two mountain lineage people coming together.
Part Cheerden, I guess.
Yes.
Would be.
But I guess chivalry was also tall, like you said. So it's definitely interesting to see that it's something that people are accepting. There's no question. There's not any theories swirling about who the real father is. So that's good to hear.
And King Aod made his way all the way from the Mountain Kingdom to see him in Buck, which is, I think, the first time that King Aod made his way down there.
Yeah, I don't know if he's gone before.
At least not in the books.
Right. Maybe when he was younger.
Yeah,
for
but
treaty purposes.
Yeah, I feel like before chivalry, though, weren't they always at war? Or like some sort of
There were like
conflict?
skirmishes, yeah.
Yeah.
But they could still have, I guess, I don't know.
I don't know if you would want your sacrifice. I mean, it's the MO of the sacrifice to go there for treaty things, but like I don't know if they would have had their leader do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Chade no longer lives in the shadows, but is the honored advisor to the queen. According to Starling, he is a foppish old man who is entirely too fond of the company of young women, but she smiles as she says it.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of around the time that he would have his kids, right? I think when Shine comes into the picture, she's like in her 20s. I don't know that for a fact, I guess.
I feel like Lant is like 17 or something.
Right. And Shine is definitely older than Lant.
But not by very much, I don't think. And I think it's one of them is with Laurel, the huntress.
Right.
So that would be in 5 years, quote unquote, during the 20-man trilogy or shortly after 20-man trilogy.
Okay.
So I think there's still 7 years or so to go before Chade's kids are born.
Okay. Is Fitz 60 in the final trilogy? Okay, I thought he was 50. That's why I was like, this would be around the time.
No, he's 60. Yeah, if he was 50, yeah, that makes sense. No, he's 60.
Interesting. But either way, Chade is living his best life. Right back to his old ways, because we know before the accident, he was also a little courtesan.
Yes, a little courtesan. It's an interesting way to put that.
I guess that's usually how you describe females, right? But no, I think men can be courtesans.
Yeah, but courtesans are usually paid for companions.
Oh, I guess he's not really paid for, is he?
No.
But he does seem to like sleeping around a lot.
Would it be a rake?
Oh, yeah,
He's
maybe.
Rakish?
I don't know. But also, I feel like when he was younger, because he did get trained to be an assassin young, I wonder if he like got into people's pants to get information. So he would be paid in information.
I mean, I think the way he described it, he also liked his lifestyle before his accident. So.
He was very attractive, apparently, when he was young. Yeah. And people still find him attractive, so.
And charming.
Yes.
Fitz is sure that Chade knows where he is, but he, meaning Chade, has never sought Fitz out. It is as well. Sometimes when Starling comes, she brings me curious old scrolls and seeds and roots for strange herbs. At other times, she brings me fine paper and clear vellum. I do not need to ask the source. Which is pretty clear that, to Fitz at least, that Chade knows where he is and is using Starling to relay these things, and then he returns some gifts once in a while as well.
Right. This is what's weird to me is that he says that Chade never sought me out and then immediately follows it by what seems like Chade seeking Fitz out by sending him stuff to translate. I don't know. It felt weird to me. And we also know, I guess it could be colored by the fact that we know that that was Chade reaching out. I think I don't know if it's the final Fitz trilogy or the next Fitz trilogy where Chade says, I
was hoping for like a response or something.
Yeah, like I was sending you that and you kept responding, and like I thought that meant that you didn't actually want to be away from this life.
Yeah.
Or something. I don't know. I feel like there's a conversation where
something about
Chade is very hurt by.
Of course, Chade and Fitz conversations later are very rough around the edges.
Yeah. Chade goes under the assumption that Fitz understands his type of love, and Fitz absolutely does not.
Yeah, Fitz doesn't understand any type of love, really.
No, sadly.
One time, he is sent a map of the 6 duchies that Verity had started. A lot of it wasn't filled out, and Fitz was kind of remarking on all of the places he had been that he could fill it out with, but just hangs it on the wall as it is and probably will never change it.
Yeah. Which I think is really cute. It does make me a little sad because I think next Fitz trilogy, the Tawny Man trilogy, I should call it, the cabin gets burnt down. So
I don't know. I don't think it's ever burnt down. It is tossed for any scrolls and information, though.
Oh.
So I remember him going through and like, oh, maybe it's burnt.
Yeah, I thought they burned it to make sure nobody could find anything important.
I'm trying to remember if it's fully burnt down or if it's just like his scroll room or something, or like his office.
Right.
I don't remember now.
I don't either.
Someone out there might. Let us know if the map survives that.
I don't think they ever mention the map again.
I feel like he does. Now that you mentioned like it like goes burnt and I remember him going back to the cabin. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Who knows?
And he remarks on the news that Starling brought about the Fool as well.
Yes.
Fool comes back to Buckkeep Castle briefly. Girl on a Dragon leaves him there, and he wept as she rose without him. He was immediately acclaimed as a hero and a great warrior. I am sure that is why he fled. He accepted neither title nor land from Regal. No one is quite sure where the Fool went or what became of him after that. Starling believes he returned to his homeland. Perhaps. Perhaps somewhere there is a toy maker who makes puppets that are a delight and a marvel. I hope he wears an earring of silver and blue. The fingerprints he left on my wrist have faded to a dusky gray. I think I will always miss him. And this is the start of the Fool going to be Amber.
Yeah.
On his next journey and task as the prophet.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I don't know if Fool knows that that's where he's going at this point in time. I mean, now it's been like 10 years from when that happened, so maybe at this point he does.
Yeah,
but
I would assume so.
When he left Buckkeep, I don't know if he knew that he was going to find the next catalyst or if he just started traveling and figured it out along the way.
Yeah.
But either way, it is nice to hear that the Fool is okay as far as we know. And I like that Fitz has imagined a nice little happy future for him. Although he's not far off because Amber does make wonderful wood creations. So I don't know. I would love to know what Fool does between the end of the mountain or the end of Girl on Dragon leaving him and when we see him next as Amber. I'm just so curious. Like, how did she get all of the stuff that she's selling in her oddity shop, you know?
Well, I don't know.
Or the funds. I don't know. There's so many questions I have about Amber.
Does she... I don't think she has an oddity shop. It's on the same street, the Rainwild street, as all the oddities, but doesn't she only deal with the beads?
No, she has, like, I think she has a full wood shop. Like, it's all woodwork. like bowls and tables.
That makes
and
sense,
stuff.
but yeah, I guess I didn't kind of lump those into oddities at all, because it makes sense that, beloved would be carving,
Right.
because that's what they love to do. But
Well, I feel like I'm pretty sure I have a memory of Althea describing it as though the wood was like naturally made that way, like, or something. Like, I think there's like the carvings are really realistic or something.
I think it's just a way to hint to the reader that this is
Right.
skill wrought.
Right. But I mean, I don't know. I feel like well, we'll wait. I don't know. It just feels weird that it would just be plain tables and chairs, especially knowing what Fool does when in Tawny Man Trilogy to Fitz's table whenever he comes back, where he like puts grapevines and makes it look whimsical. I don't know. Either way, Fool is gone and Fitz misses him, which is a lot deeper of a response than we got about Molly, but perhaps that's because Molly and Burrick's memories have been put into Girl on Dragon.
The pain, yeah.
So he can't really think too hard about missing them.
Yeah, for sure. And so Fitz goes into a description and explanation of where he's been.
Yeah.
And what has happened to him after the events of the last chapter. I was 6 years in finding my way back to Buck. 1 we spent in the mountains, so that takes him immediately right after the ending. And 1 was spent with Black Rolf. Nighteyes and I learned much of our own kind in our seasons there, but discovered we like our own company best. He moves on after Holly's effort at matchmaking didn't pan out. And he says that they've been north to the near islands, where the wolves are as white as the bears. They've been south to Chalced and even beyond Bingtown. We have walked up the banks of the Rain River, and ridden a raft back down. We have discovered that Nighteyes does not like traveling by ship, and I do not like lands that have no winters. We have walked beyond the edges of Verity's maps. He says he thought he'd never return back to Buck, but then all of a sudden they were there and they stayed. The cottage they claimed wasn't far from Forge, and that people had abandoned Forge for now, but there's rich mines there, so eventually he's assuming people are going to be moving back. But
right.
Not yet. Too many bad memories there. When Starling comes, she chides me and tells me I am a young man yet. What, she demands of me, became of all my insistence that one day I would have a life of my own. I tell her I have found it. Here in my cottage, with my writing and my wolf and my boy. Sometimes when she beds with me and I lie awake afterward listening to her slow breathing, I think I will rise on the morrow and find some new meaning to my life. But most mornings when I awake aching and stiff, I think I am not a young man at all. I am an old man trapped in a young man's scarred body. So they've been in a lot of places. They spent the year in the mountains. They went to Black Rolf's for a year. They went all the way up north and all the way down south.
Yeah.
And back again.
It's definitely interesting to see the progression and what has been happening in Fitz's life. I also think that it is a little bit of a cop-out for him to say that he's found that life of his own that he always wanted, because I don't really think he is living. And I know that Fitz has always had a simplistic view of what he would do outside of being an assassin, but that view was to become a farmer, not to sit in a cabin alone all of the time. And I don't know, I guess who he becomes when he marries Molly and in between the Tawny Man trilogy and the final trilogy, I think that's more of finding a life of his own and living. This feels like purgatory. This isn't anything. Yeah. It's an in-between state of living and not living.
And I think a lot of that is because of those feelings that he locked away, that he can't heal from, he can't move on, he can't find a life of his own because he's trapped in that past.
Right. And also, I'm sure that life isn't as fulfilling when you have
Yeah.
locked away some of your feelings. And he's not making new memories to make up for it either. He's just alone. And I guess Hap is there, and that's great. But I don't know.
He did make a lot of new memories for like.
I guess he had traveled.
Years of traveling that he did.
But he specifically, I guess not here, but I think later specifically says that they avoided people. Like,
yeah, I think they mostly did.
So he's not really like making more human connections.
No.
Which is needed, I think.
He also talks about the skill. And this is also why the purgatory kind of fits in well, because there is a torment to it.
Yes.
It feels like he is just waiting there, and he says that, sometimes that addiction, that temptation just reaches forth, and he's tempted to reach forth as Verity once did, and sometimes he does. The torment of it, as Verity once told me, is that no one ever reaches back. Once, when the skill hunger was on me to the point of madness, I even reached for Verity as dragon, imploring him to hear me and answer. He did not. Regal's coteries long ago disbanded for lack of the skill master to teach them. Even on the nights when I skill out in despair, as lonely as a wolf's howling, begging anyone to respond, I feel nothing, not even an echo. Then I sit by my window and look out through the mists past the tip of Antler Island. I grip my hands to keep them from trembling, and I refuse to plunge myself whole into the skill river that is waiting, always waiting to sweep me away. It would be so easy. Sometimes all that holds me back is the touch of a wolf's mind against mine. My boy has learned what that look means. He describes that Hap prepares him some elfbark tea with ginger to cut the bitterness, and some carry-me leaves to help him sleep. And to just get him good paper so he can write, and then he'll clean up in the morning because he'll fall asleep in his writings.
Yeah. It's kind of really sad to see what this skill addiction is doing to Fitz.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think if he were with people, it would be a little bit easier to fight the addiction. But he isn't. So he's doing the best he can. And I think it's really interesting that he says that he calls out when he feels lonely, and he doesn't ever hear an answer, not even an echo. And I wonder if this calling out, this loneliness, is what calls Nettle to him later.
I think
what helps her find him.
I think it's been happening, first of all. Like, I'm sure during this whole thing, he's 30 now.
Right.
And Nettle was born and would be 9 right now or so.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe 10, 11. No, she would be like 11.
Because she was a baby when he was in the mountains.
She'd be like 11. Dutiful would be like 10 or something.
Right.
And so it's been happening since they were like 3 or 4. It's some of their first memories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think so. I think him reaching out, looking for that connection, and them finding each other in dreams was just kind of natural. That familial connection.
Yeah. The book ends with Fitz saying that Nighteyes is sprawled at his feet in the morning after these intense bouts with skill, and they dream of carving their own dragon.
And that's how it ends.
Yeah.
The series.
Dual ending.
I wonder if she knew then that she would continue and it would end with them carving their own.
I feel like yes. I mean, I don't think all the details were there, but I think
I'm not sure. She's had some quotes about talking about the reception of Tawny Man, and that's when she like read fan fiction and was like really mad about things and in a bad headspace because of fans and things like that, and she wasn't sure that she was going to write that last trilogy. So I don't know if she knew she was going to end it with that, or if she had planned. She seems to me not a full out let's plan this and these are the stories I'm going to tell. It's like, I have stories to tell and they came to me just now.
Right.
And it'll be a continuation of this story.
That's fair. I guess to me, it feels like it was always an option and like something that she thought was the natural progression of what would happen in this character's lifetime just by ending this trilogy that way. I don't know if she knew she would do any more after she got finished with this trilogy, but I think it's fair to say that she didn't plan it ahead of time, but also could have in this moment in writing imagined like, okay, 40 years in the future, what does Fitz do? And
Right.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that it has to be set in stone, but
nice. So that ends Assassin's Quest. That ends the Farseer trilogy.
yeah.
Oof.
I can't believe it's over.
I know. Over 2 years. 2 years and let me count on my fingers
change.
real quick. 3 months? 2 years and 3 months almost? Maybe not quite a full 3 months.
I don't even remember when we started, like what month we started in, so.
February was our trailer release. I think like end of February, so it was like early March.
Sure.
So 2 months and a couple weeks change. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to the whole trilogy. Thank you so much for listening along with us, sharing your thoughts and listening to our thoughts on this, and seemingly caring about our thoughts on this. So thank you very much for tuning in. If you would like to reach out to us and let us know how we're doing, how you are doing, or how you feel about this trilogy or what you're looking forward to next in the Live Ship Traders trilogy that we're starting, please let us know at isfitzhappy@gmail.com or message us directly on any of our social medias. It's Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. We're at isfitzhappy for all of those. As I mentioned, we are starting the Live Ship Traders next. We're going to be taking a couple week break here before our next episode releases. So we need some time off. I'm sure you guys need some time off, or some of you will probably not want any time off, but we need some time off for sure.
We're also moving to a different country, so it's perfect timing.
So lots to do.
Yes.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope to see you in a few weeks' time.
Okay, so we finished the chapter and also the series. Before we get into some of the questions that we got from the book as a whole and also the series as a whole, like our normal end of the book discussion, we're going to start with a couple questions we got about some chapters that we went through. First, we have a question from Ellen asking us how Verity knows where the Skill River is.
And how he knew it would help him in carving his dragons, and talking just about like why Verity found it, why he did what he did, and how he would have figured out that would have helped.
Yeah.
Which I feel like we kind of covered in bits and pieces, some of this question at least. But my overall thoughts kind of condensed and collected here is that skilling a lot gives you insights into things that you need to do, and he was skilling for years straight. 2, in the skill sitting in Kelsingra himself, or this Kelsingra it would be, because he was there before he got to the Stone Garden.
Right.
In Kelsingra, Verity could have found some knowledge about this, about or seen some memories or something about using the skill to do this, or a memory about, putting someone into stone or preserving them some way, something like that. 3, going to the Stone Garden, he would have seen that it was all of, dragons there, like and seemingly statues. So maybe gets a hint about carving stuff, goes to the quarry, sees this black stone with silver streaks through it, and can kind of put it all together, especially with studying Girl and a Dragon, like we said, and maybe getting that story the same way that Fitz did by touching Girl and a Dragon, of the origins of the coterie, carving it, it's suffusing with color, starting to take off, and then sinking back into the quarry.
Right. I'm not really sure how Verity found the Skill River.
Yeah, that's the part I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm under the impression that the reason why he decided to leave his hands with the skill and use that as a tool is because he probably felt pretty weakened. He's pretty physically weak at this point, and we know that he is by himself because everyone else has left or died, and it would be really hard going through the skill road alone. And so I think he just knew that the amount of skill it takes to build one of these dragons is not something that he could do on his own. And so my opinion is just that he thought if he physically had more skill on him, that would grow his power, which is correct, but also probably why he initiated putting it on him, just to get more strength to finish his task.
And it turned out to be the correct way to do it.
Yeah. I don't know that other people did it that way. I don't think this is like the normal way to do it. I'm of the opinion that it works. I just think that like normally people are just chiseling it as normal. I mean, when Fitz when Fitz has the memory of Girl on Dragon being created, he doesn't make any mention of the hands of the people carving also being laved in skill. Like, they don't have silver hands that he's discussed, which could just be Fitz being a faulty narrator and not thinking that's an important point to say in this reading. Or it could be because they didn't and other people don't use that. It's just that normally there's a group, and when you're by yourself or there's two of you, you need the extra strength of physical skill to help push you along.
Quite possible, yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not totally convinced this is normal practice, and I'm also not totally convinced Verity knew for a fact this would help.
Right.
But I do think it's pretty easy to see that the physical manifestation of skill would probably have some strengthening of power effect, and he was pretty weakened by starving and being alone. So I don't know. That's my thoughts. But I don't know how he found it. It's either luck or or he found it through the listening to the skill city of where to go.
Yeah, he could have projected himself into the skill, been floating around and kind of called to it, just as Fitz was attracted to it as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for that question. And Ellen also sent in another question about our discussion on the inner duchies and how bad they are as a people, and our discussion surrounding the Forged Ones and their humanity and the King's Circle and things like that. Ellen points out that the Forged Ones in the King's Circle would not have been inner duchies folk, so with their animosity and things like that towards the outer duchies, the coastal duchies, they can remove themselves from the tragedy a little bit more.
Right.
And therefore, they wouldn't have felt as bad about it. You know, it's not like our own fighting to the death and being crazy people. It's the crazy outer duchy people being crazy people.
Right.
So, just a little bit more context, which I thought was poignant.
Yeah, definitely. And a good reminder.
Yeah.
Something we missed. And it draws the question of, or I guess it's not a question, but draws the point that the Forged Ones probably would be going inland because they'd be attracted to skill use, and Regal is surrounding himself with skill users. Yeah. So they would be in the inner duchies to be captured for the King's Circle. Yeah. They wouldn't really have to like go to the outer duchies to find them.
And Fitz and Verity moved that way.
True.
As well. There's probably lots of skill coming from the mountains.
Yeah.
I think that wraps it up for all of the episode or chapter questions.
Yeah.
I guess. But we do have questions for the entire series and for us. And some questions to ask you about the series and the future series and stuff like that. So without further ado, we'll get into a trilogy recap. Woohoo!
Yeah.
First off, we have some questions from Facebook as well. And this is more of a thought exercise on things we've been talking about recently.
Yeah.
And things that I've mentioned more so, mainly about Verity as the protagonist of the trilogy, if it would be more like, a typical fantasy series.
Right.
So the question is about where would that story begin? What role would Fitz have? What would have been fast forwarded over? What plot points would be in there? What's kind of like the general overarching? I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this, but just kind of like some highlight points of what would be Verity's story arc over this time. Would it even be a trilogy?
I feel like this story would start kind of similar to the same starting point as Fitz, except I don't think it would start with him meeting Fitz. Maybe it would, because that's the start of the downfall of chivalry, but I think chivalry abdicating the throne would be the center opening plot point.
Me too. I agree with that.
I think it could be a trilogy, although maybe it'd only need to be 2 books. But I think overall it would start with Verity's newfound purpose of being king in waiting and trying to figure out what to do next, having to deal with his brother having an illegitimate son that he's being asked to look over. I think Fitz would have a pretty minor role overall. Maybe
it would gradually grow larger, but more like, in my mind, like a perseverances in the last trilogy. Maybe a chapter or 2, like kind of surrounding him as a focal point, but mostly just a side character and not really in there.
Yeah,
or maybe like Cook Sarah, always pops up and has like some sort of thing going on. But
I guess I see him more as like the fool's role in this trilogy, where like important things happen. There are big scenes that happen with Fitz, but overall, like we could go chapters without hearing anything about him.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think there would be a lot more fighting with Shrewd. I think we'd see a different side to Shrewd that we don't really get to see from Fitz's perspective, because now it's the father role and also a father who doesn't seem to really think his son can do this.
It would be a lot more political and a lot more outward conflict. A lot of the books for this trilogy is inner conflict with Fitz and like monologuing because he is such a silent person. I feel like centered around Verity would be a lot of there would be some of that, of course. It's Robin Hobb writing it in this thought exercise. But a lot of it would, I think you're right, be discussed with Shrewd or with Chade or with his brother over the skill. I think in the beginning, the first book, Fitz is glossed over and skimmed over for like 3-4 years, and he kind of grows up quickly in chapters.
Right.
I think the first book would dive head into Verity's character and linger on those years that Fitz skipped over.
Right. Well, I definitely think that there would be more to do with Queen Desire.
100%.
I think we'd be seeing more of that internal conflict of how Desire is trying to get Regal a leg up and isn't necessarily as successful while she's alive, and the aftermath of her death and Chivalry's death. I think that's something that is too traumatic for Fitz, and so we skip over. But what would that look like from Chivalry's point of view? I think that would be a really big turning point for him, although I don't think he would. I don't know if he thinks that Desire did it. I don't know if he has any suspicions. I mean, he knows that Chivalry is a good rider of horse, so like for him to fall off and die is pretty sus, but I don't know if he...
I feel like Verity would suspect because he keeps things close to his chest.
Right.
I mean, there's only 1 or 2 scenes where Fitz, who is skill linked with him, realizes the depth of his hurt from Regal's betrayal, right? So he's very careful and has been trained to be a prince of the throne. Like he is. I kind of see him always like, oh yeah, he's the gruff soldier, honest kind of man. No, he was trained to be a potential king.
Right.
So he still has, the diplomatic training and experience, not as much as chivalry, obviously, or regal, because that's not his forte, but he can play things close to his chest if he wants to.
Yeah. I also think that there would be a surprising amount of Verity being aware of what is going on with Fitz. Like, I think
Yeah, me
Shrewd
too.
probably counseled with Verity a lot more than Fitz knows, because Verity has a lot of regrets about how Fitz was ultimately treated and used. So does Shrewd in his final days. And I think that we would see this like calculating side of Verity that we don't really get, of how a commander in an army uses some soldiers at the front line if it means they gain more footing. So I think that would be something that happens.
There wouldn't be a lot of Byrrc.
No.
There would be probably more, I wouldn't say more Chade, but there would be different Chade discussions.
Yeah.
Probably less Chade, but more interesting discussions with Chade.
Yeah.
It would fast forward through a lot of the skilling out to the red ships, I think. Maybe a couple focused paragraphs on certain things, but like, I spent my whole summer doing this kind of, description.
Right.
I killed 13 more times with my king that summer, and the one line,
Yeah.
I think there would be a lot of that skimming over. There would be a lot of maybe some detail about shipbuilding and things like that, and a lot of like hints leading up to Kettrican, but because of Robin Hobb's writing, it would be so distracted with like scaling out and doing this. It would just be those little subtle things. Then all of a sudden to the readers, it would be like, whoa, this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, she's so cool.
But like, well, I don't even think it would be, she's so cool, because if it's from Verity's perspective.
Right. She would definitely.
It would be like, she's so annoying.
Yeah.
And this came out of nowhere, and I guess I have to, like, he has to marry her now. But
yeah,
there would be hints dropped along the way. So there'd be a lot of different tonal shifts to different events that we see through Fitz's eyes.
I think it would also be interesting to see the perspective of how Verity came to the idea of training Fitz. I think that would be a big deal. Like living with Fitz's mind.
Yeah.
Getting to see when he realizes Fitz is witted.
The growing fondness.
And, like him. That relationship building.
And his eventual despair, and like, this is the last shot as the Elderlings. Like, that's the last hope.
Also,
and kind of clinging to that.
I think it would be really cool to read from his perspective when Fitz is trying to kill Regal, when he's like in Tradeford, like what that looks like from Verity's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I
feel like a lot of the third book would be fast forwarded to talking about like what would be skipped over, because all of Fitz's journey from Tradeford to
but that could be replaced with Verity's own journey and like what he went through. So,
I'm talking about from Tradeford to the quarry. He's already at the quarry.
Right.
He's already scraping away, and I think a lot of that would be fast forwarded.
Yeah, definitely.
It'd be very, very different, but it'd be very interesting as well.
Yeah.
Different way. It's not going to happen.
No, unfortunately not.
It would be a lot of fun, though. So thank you so much for that thought exercise, too.
Yeah.
One last thing from Facebook.
Okay.
And we'll move on to some other stuff. Thoughts on the future with how much of a time commitment this is. Our first trilogy took over 2 years. Just asking general thoughts on the time commitment and what it means. Because it's a lot.
It is a lot. And we do this for free. This is our hobby.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
With full-time jobs. I estimated, I looked at the chapters for this next trilogy, Live Ship Trader Trilogy, and it's estimated at about 2.3 years to get through this, if we don't skip any weeks or have two-parters or anything like that. So I'm guessing 2.5 years would be a conservative but probably pretty good estimate to get through this next trilogy. So quite a bit
Yeah.
General thoughts on it. It's a lot, and it will continue to be a lot, but I'm still enjoying my time doing this.
Yeah.
So I don't see myself stopping anytime soon unless like major life changes come up and we like physically cannot do this
Right.
anymore in terms of time or, you know, commitment in general.
Right.
But yeah, I looked over at my notes preparing for this episode, and my notes meaning the first document we were putting together about what our podcast was going to be.
Yeah.
And I have try not to make it over an hour and a half per episode because it drags on too long. And while that could be definitely true for some listeners out there who are probably no longer listening because a lot of episodes have gone beyond that, I think it's something we might need to revisit and trim down some of the fat and things like that. I don't know. Make it a little bit more economical, maybe put out 2 episodes a week, but that's a lot of time commitment up front to record and edit.
Right.
So we have considerations, but I am enjoying my time, and I really like going through the series this closely.
Yeah. I think overall, this has been pretty fun. I get a little bit more stressed than Luke does, I think, with making sure that we're commenting back to people in a timely manner. I'm really bad about it. And it makes me feel really bad because you guys are taking time to reach out to us. And so I try to be good about it, but I'm just not very good at like being a timely response person in my normal life. So, so I think that is a stressful thing that I'm going to have to like continue to work on going forward to make sure that doesn't like outweigh the pros of doing this. And I do love seeing everything from people. It's just, I do feel bad when I'm not as good about getting back to people. And I think that's been one of the most negative things about this. And that's my own shortcoming. It's something I guess that anybody else is doing. But yeah, I think you're right. As far as time commitment, it is a lot, but as long as our lives aren't too drastically changed, like, I don't know, I feel like it's still doable. And like you said, we can definitely work on trimming things and making it a bit more tidy. I think the real danger here is just that people get bored of waiting for us to finish a book or a section.
Yeah.
And maybe, 4 years from now, we have no listeners because everybody's over it. But I think as long as we continue to enjoy it more than we have qualms, that we'll probably continue to do this.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we put out a Instagram story.
Yeah.
That had some questions on there, and people responded. So first off, is Fitz happy?
No.
This does tie. Well, no, we'll move on to that later. But yeah, is Fitz happy in general? Is Fitz happy?
I don't know. I think Fitz spends most of his life unhappy. There are definitely chunks overall where he is happy.
Brief flashes.
Yeah. And I mean, he's got a couple good decades in there when he lives his best life with Molly. And, before the end of the trilogy.
Readers can definitely have issues with that time in his life, running away from things or not disclosing things, but he is definitely happy during that time too.
Yeah, I think he's more happy near the end. But overall, I think Fitz isn't happy. I think this is one of the funny things we get a lot, and a lot of people will always be like, oh, no, the answer is no to your name.
Right.
And that's overall correct.
That's kind of one of the reasons we made the name or chose the name is because, it's a little bit funny to ask, is Fitz happy? Because usually the answer is no. But it's also kind of a dive into when is he happy,
Yeah.
Is him being content with something, him being happy? Just a little bit more dive into his character, which is what kind of sparked the thought on the podcast as well, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely think overall I would say no, but I think Fitz can be happy and he has moments.
I use the word content a lot, and I think that's pretty much the majority of what he feels at his peak is content, which is really sad to think about. But like you said, there are moments where he is genuinely happy and periods of his life where he is genuinely happy. It's just mostly the most we get is content.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think being happy 24/7 is an impossible ask,
100%.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And content is actually like a pretty good thing to aim for. And it's pretty good considering the life that he has been handed.
Right.
But yeah, I think content in a way that like he doesn't think he deserves more than what he's at. And so the contentness is with something that isn't necessarily comfortable. It's just what he's used to.
100%. Well, the next question we have on here is movie or show castings. Who would we cast for things? And we've kind of talked about this in, I think, some of the other recap ones.
Yeah.
But is there anything that's popped into your head over this book in particular that you're like, this person needs to play this character?
You know, not really.
Same here. Like, I don't know.
I keep trying to think like who would make a good Starling, and I would feel bad casting anyone in that role because Starling isn't
You
really
don't
well
like-
liked.
Yeah.
I like Starling for the most part.
Right.
I think she's a very interesting character. As a character, I really like her. I think she does a good job. As a person, she's okay. I just would hate. I feel like Starling is not a fan favorite, and whoever steps into that role would have to deal with people not liking them.
Right.
And
yeah.
I would feel bad putting anyone I liked in that role.
I will have to answer this as like I have no idea. I will say we did talk about it before and might get better answers, but honestly, I just don't think like that usually. I don't know. I've expressed my doubts about adaptions for this series before in the past. I just
Right.
don't think it would work with the time jumps and with how introspective and, you know, in Fitz's head it is. It
Right.
could definitely work. Like there could definitely be scenes that could be translated and everything. It's just so much that's weird. There's two different types of talking in somebody's head, and that's always
Right.
kind of wonky. So like I don't think in terms of a show or a movie most times.
That's fair. I feel like, to be fair, the next trilogy would be great for a show.
Yeah,
I
think
think
so too.
Is perfect for what you would want to see in it. There's a lot of characters. There's adventure. You're on the sea. I don't know. I just feel like that's more. That's easier to portray. Like the talking ships is easier than showing wit or skill.
Right.
And I don't know.
Yeah, so in terms of your question, I apologize. I don't really have any good castings, to be honest. It'd be very interesting to see anybody else out there who has specific castings. I know on the Robin Hobb subreddit, there have been lots of fan castings for The Fool, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of names thrown about for him, or for Amber even. I think I've seen a couple like specific calling out the different facets of Beloved.
I think I just had a thought that it'd be really cool to see Kettle played by Dame Judi Dench.
Yeah, I could definitely see that actually.
I feel like she's like the perfect old woman.
I would see her or Dame Maggie Smith.
I feel like Maggie Smith, this is like a
She's
weird
a little bit too wispy, maybe.
Yes, that's what I was like, just gonna say. Like, I don't want it to come off bad. I just like don't think.
She doesn't have the actual presence on stage.
Yeah, not that Maggie Smith isn't a good actress. I just think it isn't a right fit for her.
Yeah, that's fair.
Personally.
That's fair. I think you kind of grasped Judi Dench would be great. All right, well, the next question, unfortunately, is when are we starting Tawny Man? And I kind of already answered this.
Womp womp. Like 3 years from now.
Yeah, the person who has it can't wait for it. They're very excited.
I'm so sorry.
We are moving on chronologically and publication order.
Yes.
So it is Live Ship Traders next. Ship of Magic. You're going to have to wait 2.5 years to see Fitz again.
Set a reminder on your calendar now and just wait.
Yeah, exactly.
If you really hate the trade ship, what live ship trilogy?
Yeah. So I'm going to interrupt the Instagram questions because that is a great segue into a couple questions that I wrote about this.
Yeah.
Since we won't be seeing Fitz for a very long time, or Nighteyes for a very long time, or any of those characters, what are the characters you'll be sad to see go for a while? Maybe forever. Maybe this is the last book they appear in. Of course, off the bat, Fitz and Nighteyes. Nighteyes
Right.
more so than Fitz because sometimes it's nice to have a break from Fitz.
Same.
But Nighteyes is great. I'll miss Chade. I'll miss Ketrikin.
Interesting. Okay. I will also miss Nighteyes the most. I am actually going to miss Regal because I feel like listen, he's a horrible person, but I feel like of the villains in the Hobb universe, maybe one of the tamer ones.
He is, and I kind of wanted to point this out. I was formulating the thought as you were talking about it, actually. He is close to what you've called before mustache twirling villain.
Yes.
That we can disassociate a lot of like terrible things that he has done of like, he's the villain. Because in the next series we have Kyle and Kenneth. And Kenneth, you know he's kind of bad, but you don't find out how bad he is until like the second book.
Right.
And like how depraved he can actually be. And by that time, Robin Hobb does a great job of developing some sort of sympathies for like how he's feeling or like something like that. And then Kyle is just like your everyday evil person. So it's even more threatening in the book series.
Yeah, I think from here.
So Regal is pretty tame in the.
Yeah, I think from here all the villains are like worse, and that's hard to say because like what Regal did to Fitz in the dungeons is horrible, and what Regal was willing to sacrifice to become king also really bad. His morals in general are really bad, but like on the whole he wasn't successful, and he's not like a systematic problem that like there's not gonna be another Regal, right? At least for a while. This isn't like there's not one to pop up and take his place next because Regal's kind of unique in that way. And I think
there's always another Kyle.
Yeah. There's always Kenneths out there. There's always Kyles out there. There's always the Pale Woman out there. Like people who are in power and revel in taking advantage of others to get their way, which I guess you could argue. Which does
describe Regal. But yes, I feel like his story, one, it's young Regal all the way through, or young Fitz even, all the way through the end, where he is completely subverted and Fitz like fully triumphs over him.
Yes.
And you see how much of a spoiled child and ineffectual he actually is in his brain. Right. So like you get the full like cathartic, well, he's finished now.
Yeah, there's no more. Whereas everyone else, it's like, okay, well, you didn't really solve the problem. So this isn't going to change anything by getting rid of them.
Right. You're gonna be sad to see him go.
Yes, for that purpose. Also because I do think
he's a great character.
Yeah, he's a great character.
I feel like the other villains are better characters.
Sure. Okay.
But I agree with you that I am also not looking forward to reading them as much because of what we just discussed.
Right.
Anyone else that is kind of off the wall that you'll be sad to see go?
Not really. I guess I'm sad that we don't get to see any more of Kettle. I think she's a really interesting voice of reason for Fitz.
I'll be sad to see Lady Patience go for a while.
Yeah, I am excited to see Lady Patience again. She doesn't really get a bigger role than what we saw in this series, which is sad. And
she talks a lot more in the 20-man trilogy, I believe.
Really?
At the end of it, yeah. When he comes back, he calls her mother.
Right.
They live at the manor for a little bit in Withy Woods. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, so I don't know. I'll miss her, and I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of done with everybody at this point. I'm like over it.
Okay, who are you happy to see go then? I'm happy to see Will go. I didn't think he was a very good villain.
Verity. I like Verity, but I'm kind of happy he's gone. He's a conflicting hero. I think you're right, Will. I don't know. I kind of like Will in that he's like so slimy as a bad guy. A very very good henchman.
I see it. I just don't think his character was that well done. Because, and maybe that's just the perspective we get from Fitz, but he's just, and he's described this way, but he's a blank slate. He's literally nothing but just an ominous presence to like avoid. And I just don't think it's, I don't know. I'm just happy to see him go because it doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah,
and that's
fair.
Obviously a lot from the trauma that Fitz experienced at Will's hands.
Right.
And he did pose a threat. I just didn't think he didn't get any development really until like the last page when he was dying.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, oh, Will was a nobody. You could barely recognize who he was if you looked at his face. Oh, he's super good at the skill. And then all of a sudden, the last like book, he's like, oh, he's stealing other people's skill strength. That's scary. Better not run into him. Keep my walls tight. And then all of a sudden, oh, he literally couldn't do anything. He was a puppet. He was like, you know, all this kind of stuff. He's conflicted because he doesn't know why Regal abandoned him because he's a lost puppy. Like,
you know what though?
Just nothing to the end.
If there was a movie of this, I kind of want, I don't remember his first name, Skarsgård, the guy who plays It, to play Will. Because I feel like that's the right amount of creepy to like really freak everybody out. Give the right vibe for like what Fitz feels.
I feel like he has too unique of a face to do it though.
I feel like that's why it's perfect.
I guess artistic liberties.
And like,
show.
I don't know. I feel like he can have a very like normal looking face. You know what I mean? Like, I think he can like blend in if he needed to. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I won't miss Will. I won't miss Barrel Guy or we never see him again anyway, but still holding a grudge. I don't really miss Hands. I don't think I'm ever going to miss him.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in him. I understand why he's freaked out about seeing Fitz, but like, he was nice enough, but I'm glad he's gone.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think I miss any of the coterie, to be honest. Like they played their part. The rest of them did. I feel like Burl got way more character development, and so did what's her name? Who was the one woman who was in the coterie?
Oh, I know who you're talking about, but I have no idea what her name is.
We've talked about it multiple times, just a brain fart. But anyways, yeah, she had more development than Will, to be honest, to me. Like all of them did except for Will. So I'm not necessarily happy to see them go, but I'm like happy they won't be back.
That's fair.
You know, they played their part. They did well. Good job, them.
See, that's how I feel about Verity. Like, I don't know. I have very conflicting feelings about him because of some of the choices he makes. And the way, I think my problem is that Fitz sees him as such a like pure good person.
That's
and
Fitz.
And then you can clearly read between the lines. And that's like from somebody who thinks he's a good guy. So like, what aren't we seeing? And I don't know, that makes me really suspicious of him.
You always are thinking of like, oh, what's behind the scenes though.
You know what? I will be sad to see Shrewd go though.
Yeah, I will be. Actually, yeah.
I'm sad we'll never see him again.
I do like Shrewd quite a bit.
He grew on me during this podcast.
Oddly, I'm sad to see Wallace go in some ways. Because he's such a bumbling idiot that thinks he's correct.
Yeah.
He's so annoying to read, but like at the same time, it's perfect.
He makes me think of Filch.
A little bit, yeah. And I will say one last thing. I am sad to see the Fool go. We never get the Fool again. Not as he is in these books.
No. Ugh, that's it. That is sad. You know what? That's a good one.
Yeah. I think he comes out because of Fitz and Lord Golden's talks, maybe, about like who he is and different facets of him and things like that.
Right.
And he like switches to speech patterns for a little bit. But it's never the same.
Yeah.
And Beloved is definitely a different person.
Yes. I think the closest we get to having the Fool back is in the ship with Fitz in the final trilogy.
Maybe
on the way, and even that is just bare glimpses, and that's because he can tell Fitz is upset about Amber and Lord Golden and like feeling like he doesn't know this person. And I think really the only time Fool is strong is in the memory of Fitz comparing who Fool is now to who he was.
So I will be sad to see the Fool go.
Yeah. But I'm really excited about Amber. She's the best.
All right, so we'll move back to some of the Instagram stuff here. The next question is, will we be able to record without crying? The ending plus any of the other stuff.
I can't promise I will never cry again, but proud to say, dry eyes over here. I'm so over this book. No, that's not fair. I love this series and I will talk about it till the day I die, but as for what we're doing, I'm like ready to get to the next series. So no tears here. I need a break from Fitz.
There's definitely been times where I have teared up, not necessarily teared up, but like been overcome by emotion or like choked up or like thick voice kind of reading stuff out on the podcast. More so alone when I'm rereading the chapters for like the first time again. Then I'll get teared up, but talking about it, not so much. I'm more of like an analytical mind there.
I definitely cry a lot more.
Yeah.
Just in general. I cry reading the books. I cry talking about the books.
I cry reading the books too.
Yeah.
Not as like heavily or anything, but yeah.
I'm just an emotional person anyway. I take after my dad that way.
So be able to record without crying, yes for me, for the most part.
Yeah.
Most part, yes for you.
Occasionally. I think next book series will have me crying the most. Well, I don't think overall. I think the final will really make me cry. But the next series is really sad in a way that I don't think a lot of the other ones are. So I'm not looking forward to that. But yeah, good question.
And to wrap up this trilogy, or the questions for this trilogy, is the ending of Assassin's Quest happy? The person who asked it and their friends are divided on whether it's happy or sad.
Why don't you go first? Because I think I don't have a very good answer.
My thoughts on this is that both you and your friends are correct, no matter what you choose, because it really depends on the perspective. In terms of the overall story, yes, it's a happy ending. The Six Duchies get saved. There is a Farseer on the throne. Fitz gets his wish that Nettle is not involved. Molly and Beric are happy together. In terms of Fitz himself, no, he is not happy, and clearly he is not happy. However, it's, I don't know, thinking as a person reading it from Fitz's perspective, I feel a triumph at the ending, just as Fitz kind of did, and yet it leaves you feeling hollow. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's similar to all of Robin Hobb's books, at least all of her trilogies in this series in particular. They just kind of leave you feeling like emotionally drained and not on a, woo, that was great note.
Yeah.
It was more like, it's more like Frodo at the end of the series where he's just like, it's over. It's done. You know, let's go back to the Shire. I can't remember the taste of strawberries, Sam.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I see both sides to that. My personal thoughts is that as cliche as it is, it's bittersweet in a way, which is kind of a cop-out because it's neither sad nor happy. I don't know. How about you?
I don't think this is a happy ending. I think too many bad things have happened to Fitz and not really any conclusion for Fitz as a character. Like, yes, the Six Duchies was saved and he kind of cared about that, but ultimately that's not really his responsibility, right? Like, he's not in line for the throne and he isn't even acknowledged as a Farseer. I mean, I guess partially as a Farseer bastard. You're right. Yeah. So, but I mean, that wasn't really his responsibility to begin with. That was more Verity's thing. And sure, Molly found happiness, which is great, and I'm glad, but not with Fitz and not in the life that Fitz had hoped for. And Nettle didn't go to the throne, but his other child did. And that's something that we never really get to dig into of Fitz's feelings, because it is Verity's child, but
Right.
his body made it.
Okay, so I have a question for you then.
Okay,
For analysis' sake,
sure.
is a book's tone, whether any book,
Okay.
dependent, if it's, how do I phrase this? Is a book reliant on being happy, sad, tragedy, comedy, what have you, based on our main characters' goals and aspirations and whether they accomplish them or not?
I think yes. Right? Like Hamlet's a tragedy because everyone dies at the end. And
I feel like the Shakespeare tragedy and comedy
Right.
thing, it's like comedies are if they didn't die, and
Right.
tragedies are if they did, like
right. But I think like if you look at Shakespeare, those are usually classified based solely on what happens to our main characters, right? And in other literature, I think usually a happy ending is when the main character, especially in a reading like this where it's first person, their goals have been met and they have done what they set out to do. I mean, I think the Hunger Games, for example, that's not really a happy ending, even though Katniss takes down the society that she had set out to take down, because I think there's so much trauma left over. But that's like, I don't know. She herself is not happy near the end, I don't think. I don't know. I haven't like fully read those books, so I shouldn't like make judgments. I just know based off movies and like some things I have read on the internet. But like, I don't know. I guess I personally classify it as were the needs of the main character met and like the goals. And
so is Lord of the Rings a happy series?
I don't know. I guess
Because
that is
they destroy the ring.
touche.
They get to go home. They restore the Shire from the Scouring. All of the kingdoms of men are like, allied again. Aragorn is crowned king. But there's such a melancholy to the ending. There is such a, this phase of the world has ended and a lot of its history is leaving. Like, I don't know if I would call it a happy ending.
Yeah.
But they accomplished all their goals.
That's fair.
So I feel like it's, yes, partially what you said, but I feel like it's also up to the author to set a tone. And the epilogue of this, some of it is said in a happy way.
Yeah,
like
that's fair.
Yeah, all of these people are in great places. But again, it also talks about Fitz's own suffering and torment. So I'm like, it's bittersweet.
Yeah.
If you look at it from Fitz, it's sad and a tragedy.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's why I'm conflicted on it.
I don't know.
I agree with your thoughts on like, yeah, that's the person that we're emotionally invested in.
Yeah.
That is the main person we, as readers, put all of our thoughts into, is the main character, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are invested in them achieving what they want because presumably, and in most books, not all, we like them.
Right.
There are anti-heroes, there are, villain point of view perspectives, but in general, for an author to make a reader want to keep reading, their main character has to be somewhat likable or sympathetic.
Right. So
you get attached to their motives, and if they accomplish those, that's great, right? Sometimes. So I don't know. I'm conflicted.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like if we look at what Fitz is left with, it's not really a happy ending. And like, yeah, everybody else gets a happy ending. Like, there are definitely happy endings happening. They're like, the state of the world is better off based off what happened in this series.
Yeah, the Fool has an extremely happy ending, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he also probably feels sorrow for his friend Fitz, or longing for Fitz, or whatever.
Well, even just like sadness that the girl on Dragon left without him, and that he doesn't have direction anymore. What does he do next? I feel like that's not the best ending, right? Like,
but his motives, his goals, all came true and were realized. So it's, I don't know, like,
it is really hard. I think it is. I don't know. I just want to say that it's not happy based solely on this suffering that Fitz still continuously has to live with.
That's fair.
But like you said, I think there's arguments for both sides, and I would not yuck someone's yum for thinking this is a happy ending.
So thanks for that question there.
Yeah.
It's a fun one to think about. I will skip the last question. Or no, there's one more. Actually, oh man, I skipped this one before I said let's finish up with this series questions. One person chimed in, not necessarily with a question, but said that they wished that Fitz recognized the woman in the market as his mother.
Yes.
That would have changed so much. And it's hard to imagine like what would have changed with it, but like it would have changed a lot. Like a lot, I think.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know how much it could have changed. I don't think Fitz would have been allowed to go with her or to like...
No, but even just knowing that she, seemingly wanted him still or anything like that.
Right.
Would have changed his emotional makeup a lot, I think.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I feel like the end of this trilogy then would be different, and he wouldn't have put so much pain into Girl and a Dragon.
That's fair.
So I feel like then, if he doesn't put in as much, what happens with him raising Hap? Or does he rejoin more people? Or like all of this sort of thing. Does he live in the Mountain Kingdom when he's untethered and like be with his mother a little bit more? Like, does he visit his mother for a year in his travels? There's a bunch of things that like, I don't know. It could change a lot, but that's a lot of speculation.
Yeah. I don't know. I also wish he would get that closure because I think that's really important, and to realize that his mother did love him.
Right. He does later, but it's a lot later.
But also that makes me feel sad for Patience because I feel like his relationship with Patience would have suffered.
Yeah, probably.
Because he has his real mom, and I don't know. Not that adoptive parents can't be real parents, but like supposedly she made Chivalry leave he left the throne because of her, because she was upset that he had a child and she couldn't bear children. Yeah. So like I could see how that would put up a wall if he knew his mother more. I don't know.
Definitely.
But I do also wish he could have that.
So that ends our Assassin's Quest and first trilogy stuff in general.
Yeah. I do have a question for you about, I guess I don't know if it's appropriate to ask it now.
I do have a couple other questions too about general stuff, but
I was going to ask questions about this book book specifically.
Go for it.
Okay. So my first question about this book, or my only question, I guess, because we kind of answered the other one that I had, is what were your favorite and least favorite chapters? Do you know?
I don't know. Of this book?
Yeah.
In particular?
Specifically.
Least favorite is hard because they're probably just out of my memory now, so I won't be able to remember the moments. My most favorite chapter of this book might be the Avalanche Crossing one. It might be the first Kelsingra one.
That's fair.
Because it's so filled with like wonder and like, wow, this is kind of crazy. I don't know. There's a bunch of good ones, but I'm not sure if I can pinpoint exactly one.
Okay, well then, can you pinpoint your favorite moment and least favorite moment?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Favorite moment is probably, I don't know. It's probably the game of tag through at the end here, but that's recency bias. The game of tag through the Stone Garden, where they're waking all the stone dragons. I feel like that's recency bias, just because it was within the past month and not
that's fair
over a year ago or something.
Fair enough.
How about you?
I actually kept track.
Oh, nice.
So I know exactly. Yeah.
And you didn't tell me to keep track.
I told you I was putting stars on the top of the chapters.
Wow.
To be fair. My top rated chapter was chapter 35, which is Kettle's Secrets. And that's the chapter where Fitz helps Kettle heal.
Yeah.
Fitz and the Fool have their little bonding moment, and hope is restored about finishing the dragon.
That is a generally positive one, yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of good there's a lot of breakthroughs with relationships. We also learn a lot more. My second favorite is Chapter 8, Tradeford, and it's when Fitz fails to kill Regal. And the reason that I liked it so much,
that's a really good one,
is because that's where we get a really good in-depth look of what the skill does to a person from Fitz's point of view. So like we see the Will's manipulation of the skill and what other people go through Fitz. And I thought that was really, really well done and really interesting.
Also, he goes all Splinter Cell and infiltrates the castle and gets really close.
Yes, and it's really interesting. Also, potentially is successful at poisoning Regal in some small way. So those are my absolute favorites.
Nice.
And then my least favorites were 21, which is Confrontations. And that's when Starling betrays Fitz by telling about Nettle's existence or when Fitz finds out that Starling has done that.
Is that when he's telling his story to the...
Yes, he also does relive the trauma in front of Kettrican, which I also don't love. And it's when he and the Fool are fighting, kind of, because the Fool feels betrayed that Fitz told Starling and not Fool.
I think that's a good chapter.
I didn't like it. It made me sad. I was really frustrated. It's really well done, but I did not like it.
I feel like your rating is like, is he happy?
No.
Or is this kind of cool in the lore sense?
Fitz wasn't happy at the end of almost killing Regal.
I'm saying that's my second part. Or is this cool in lore sense, you know? And the other part is he really unhappy and does this make me uncomfortable?
Well, if you don't like my rating system, make your own. But the other one I didn't like was 38, which is Verity's Bargain.
The body swap.
Yes, where Verity takes over Fitz's body without accurately telling him what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So Fitz doesn't really get to...
You were very frustrated at that.
Yeah. It really changed my mind about how I see Verity. It made me really upset. So those are my favorites. Yeah. And least favorites. And then I guess to step away from the book we just read and make it about the book as a whole, or the series as a whole. Yeah. Yes. Do you have any favorite moments from the trilogy as a whole?
I have too many to list, really. So I don't know if any stick out.
Okay. Well, personally, I feel like I really liked in the second book when Burek set aside his own personal morals to help save Fitz.
Yeah.
I think that's a really touching moment. I also really like when we figure out that Rosemary is a spy for Regal. I think that's a huge thing, and it's really, really good. And then I also really like when Regal gets slapped/punched by Verity and
talking smack about Kettrican.
Yes, and Fitz pretends like he didn't see it.
Keep my wife's name out your mouth.
Literally.
I also like when Fitz is saved by Nosy at the end of the first one.
Yeah, that is a good moment.
Kingdom. It's a good moment. Mm-hmm. The whole triumphant wedding thing, even if it's kind of tragic in some ways, it's a really good moment there. So.
Yeah. I guess one last thing. How would you rank the books of the trilogy?
I like the second one the most.
Same.
I went into it saying that. Then I think the first one and then the third one.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I have.
I used to think it was second 3 or 2, 3, 1, but going more in depth, I still struggle with the slow beginning of the first one, but there are very slow parts of the third one as well. So kind of trade off there.
That's fair.
I don't know. Not any like particular reason why, but I think the second one is just paced much better than the other two. There's
a lot more action, a lot more things happening, a lot more connections and relationships being explored, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that wraps up this trilogy. We have a couple more things to talk about and questions that I had as well. What are you looking forward to most in Live Ship Traders?
I'm really looking forward to the crazy boat. I can't think of his name.
Paragon,
thank you.
The crazy boat. Sounds like a ride somewhere.
Probably is. But yeah, I'm really excited about Paragon. I like Paragon as a character.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to deep read Paragon. I'm hoping that doesn't make me dislike him. But I think on the whole, Paragon is really sweet and like mostly a good person / being.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to quite a few things. I like these books. I like the serpents. Not as much as the other characters, but way more than you do.
I really don't like the serpents.
I just like the whole pirate thing, I think.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to talking about Kenneth. I love Kenneth as a character. He's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of like the magic system and things like that. So
I really like the arcs of the characters in this next series.
Yeah.
Not that we didn't have good ones in this series, but I think getting to see the perspective of multiple people in multiple areas is definitely
in my opinion,
more fun.
This trilogy and the Tawny Man trilogy are Robin Hobb's two best sets in this series.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I think Tawny Man, Live Ship, Farseer. I'd have to reread Rain Wild in the last trilogy, but the last trilogy I wasn't super a fan of. So it's almost last trilogy or Rain Wild Chronicles are kind of even for last place for me. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to a lot of the characters and development in this. But what are you least looking forward to? For me, it is some of those characters. I am not looking forward to reading about Malta. I despise Malta until like the third book with all of my being. She is so annoying. Robin Hobb does an amazing job of writing a bratty, spoiled 11-year-old or however old she is. She's 13, I think.
Yeah.
Or almost 13. She's 12. Ugh.
I like Malta in the same way that I like Regal. That I really appreciate the depth of the character and that like I feel for them as people, but also don't like them.
I do not feel for Malta early on, but she develops a lot of depth and goes through an amazing arc, like you said. There's great transformation there.
Yeah.
But early on, I just cannot stand. I don't like Kefria either.
Yeah, she's got to be my least favorite. No, that's not fair. She's my least favorite non-essential character.
Okay. I was going to say, like, wow.
There are some pretty bad people.
I'm not going to say I dislike Wintrow, but he's boring to me in some ways.
I love Wintrow.
What happens around him is interesting. I just think that he is boring.
That's so weird because Wintrow reminds me the most of Fitz out of all the characters in the next book.
Interesting, yeah.
So it's interesting to hear you say you don't like him to me.
I like Althea, but I think some of what she whines about and thinks she's self-righteous about is totally off base and makes me like, okay, just get over it.
Yeah.
But Brashen, Amber, and Kenneth are probably my 4 favorite characters in the next trilogy.
What's the name of Kenneth's?
Edda.
I like Edda a lot.
Yeah, she's cool too.
I'm really excited to read more about her. I also really like Sorkor.
Yeah.
I think he's a good character.
Yeah.
I mean, like, in general, he's like definitely forgettable.
Two-dimensional.
Yeah. But I like him.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
There's really interesting parts about it, especially learning about the new setting and some of the character arcs. But, some parts I can take or leave.
That's fair.
I feel like this is coming from somebody who hasn't read it in a while.
That's fair.
So I'll fall in love again with things that I didn't know I enjoyed or gain a new appreciation. But, there are some things I'm not looking forward to.
That's fair. I'm also not looking forward to Brashen. I don't necessarily love him as a character. I just don't.
I like him as a character.
I think he's interesting. I think he has a good backstory. I feel like he's just as bad as Althea in that a lot of his whining and complaining 100%. Is like, okay, well, you could fix that. And also you're not looking at this the right way. So
100%. I'm annoyed by him with that too. Yeah. But in the same way I like Althea, I like Brashen too. I don't know. It's just,
that's fair.
They're good
I like who he becomes at the end. I do not like him to begin with.
And let me see. I don't even know, because I kind of know the answers to to this question at least. Least favorite part that you're anticipating in the next series? Kenneth and Althea.
Yeah, I'm not super excited to talk about who would be, but the
Right.
sexual assault that happens kind of a lot in the next series.
Kyle and Wintro.
Yeah, I don't love how Kyle treats Wintro. I mean, how Kyle treats anyone, really.
Yeah, right.
But
Kyle and Kefria, Kyle and Althea.
just Kyle in general. But
oh, I forgot to say, I do like Ronica as well.
she's okay. I like her. She's a strong person, but she has the shrewd thing where she favors one child over the other for being what they want them to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't love it.
Also, least part, one of the parts I'm not looking forward to is Malta and Rain. Malta is so manipulative and doesn't realize what she's doing is bad, and then Rain and his mother continue the courtship even though she's so young because they kind of have to, and Rain has fallen in love. I don't know, it's weird.
I don't love that at all. I think it's yucky.
It's weird. I am one of okay. I keep going back to my other questions. I am looking forward to the epigraphs of the book between the. Oh no, that's in the Rainwild Chronicles.
Yes, the best epigraphs are in the Rainwild Chronicles.
Dang it.
That's, I think, why I like that one so much.
Yeah, the bird. We talked about this before, and I just remembered that. Anyways, we're gonna have some fun with the next trilogy. I'm looking forward to that. So, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, I guess this isn't really. It doesn't have anything to do with the podcast or what the content of our podcast, necessarily. But I was gonna ask, what is something that you think you learned doing this process so far?
How to edit better, edit vocals. It's not really a joke. I spent a lot of time doing it. Probably 5 or 6 hours per episode. Some of that is not straight editing,
right?
But probably about that time. So I spent a lot of time on my computer going over voices, and it's maybe not something I loved to learn, but I did learn to pick out ums and ahs and likes in people talking in real life. So I hate it. And I know I have habits as well, but spending a lot of time listening to audio and specifically listening for those tics to take some of them out or whatever, it is annoying in real life if I'm listening to the TV or, listening on the radio or something like that.
That's fair.
Listening to my own voice. But yeah, I would say I've learned a lot more about, audio software in general and editing.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think I've learned a little bit more on how to structure my readings and what to look for when I'm reading.
Yeah.
And what I need to be thinking about beforehand. I think my notes have gotten a little bit better and more succinct.
Yeah, my notes have been eliminated pretty much.
So I think that's a big thing that I feel more confident in. I also feel like I've learned better techniques of conversing, just talking about this one thing for 2 hours at a time once a week is really good practice for other parts of life. But yeah, I don't know. Probably just that. Nothing as cool as yours. I already knew how to make memes. Cool.
Any last questions? There is one more from Instagram that I'll finish with. It's pretty general, so. Okay.
My last question from myself is, what has been your favorite theory so far, if you can think of it?
I really do like the Elle and Ida were dragons.
Mm-hmm.
I also liked the talk about the Pocked Man that we had.
Yeah.
That one was really fun too. So I think like the overarching like lore kind of theories were fun for me.
I think my favorite has got to be that the reason Regal had a seizure is that it's because Fitz was successful in his poisoning. I think that's
the dead
really
root
fun.
Or whatever it was.
Yes. And then also, of course, the Ida and Elle dragon one, just because I really like that idea. Mm-hmm. And I'm not giving it up.
The last question that we got on Instagram was just asking about us. How we met, what we do, just things in general. And I figured it would be a good one to end on to stray away from the podcast a little bit. And I know we've had some intros or some about us sections before, but I am Luke. I am in my upper 20s. And I work at a software company doing help with the customers, basically. Not quite like customer success, but close to it. So, yeah. Very interesting. Work on a computer, have Zoom meetings, data input. Very, very fun.
And then I'm Emma, obviously. I'm in my mid-20s, and I currently don't have a job because we are in the middle of moving to a new country. So I haven't gotten a job secured in the new country yet. But previously I have worked in the pharmaceutical industry in a lab setting. I am not a scientist, but I do a lot of data collection and making sure that people stick to FDA regulations, which is pretty boring. I'm nobody's favorite at work.
A little bit different. Our jobs are a little bit different than what we talk about on the podcast. Yes. That's for sure.
I definitely don't have to talk about any regulations here.
Well, my background, as I've said before, isn't really in an academic sense for fantasy. I've read a lot of fantasy in my lifetime. That's pretty much the only genre. Besides, I read a lot of old science fiction as well in the past, but that's kind of the genre I stick to. So I have a lot of context for some of the classical stories, although I would like to read more than I have in the past couple years because this has taken up a lot of time. But yes. That's all right. I'm usually read, all booked out by the time I'm done with editing a podcast or something like that. But I don't have that much academic knowledge of reviewing books or looking at themes, just high school stuff. Because in college I went for 2 years for computer engineering. I did not finish that. And that did not have many literature or English classes associated with it. So
yeah, that's fair.
So I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, following Emma's lead on some of this, learning a lot along the way, and just relying on my knowledge of the books because I've read them more times than Emma has.
Yeah. And I have a bachelor's of science in literature. Did a lot of research in my undergrad, so that's how I got the bachelor's of science instead of bachelor of arts. So I have a little bit more, I guess, of the academic side, having to argue my point or just talk in general book study format over things, looking for the nitty gritty of things. I think it's probably why I'm a little bit more critical, because I like to be critical of things, I guess. Yeah, in general. It's like
you went to school to be critical about things.
Yes. And I do enjoy it, which makes me sound a little bit rough, but I just think I don't know. It's my love language of being not with real people or like friendships, just like
with books and works of art. Yeah, sure.
I like to be critical. Yeah. So
we met, close to my hometown after I had moved back from college and Emma was still in college at the time. We both worked at the same retail store. We met at Gap.
The Gap
in our local mall. super cute. She asked me out 3 times, and I said no 3 times because I was out of the country or out of the state or city for 2 of them, and then the third one, I don't know what I was doing, but I did arrange a date after that.
Yeah,
she likes to say that she asked me out 4 times, and I said no, but it's only 3 before I had a different time.
Wisened up and said, "Oh, I should probably let her know I'm interested."
We've been together over 5 years and have been doing this podcast for 2.5 of them.
Yeah.
2.25 of them.
Yeah. So
pretty crazy.
I know. We started this not that long ago, it feels like. And yet here we are.
Right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Literally like right before it
I think the pandemic
thing.
had, I don't know, because I feel like I was working from home when we started.
It was February when we released our
That's
trailer.
True.
And lockdown was early March.
You're right, yeah.
And early March, I was still traveling. I think I was in Texas at the time, traveling for work. And I remember sitting in the airports or like a restaurant before we had to fly. And they were saying on the news, like, hey, things are getting locked down, flights are getting canceled. And we're all looking around at each other like, are we going to get home? So, yeah, we released our first episode maybe like a week after that or something like that.
Yeah.
So kind of crazy. We've been doing this mostly just through quarantine and pandemic and stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
Definitely. Good quarantine project.
And it never ends.
Never.
10 years total, probably. So that's a little bit more about us. Hope it was sufficient. Hope it wasn't as... I don't know, I'll look at the metrics and see half of retention drop down at this point when we started talking about ourselves. But,
yes. But that's okay.
Thank you for those who made it all the way through to the end of our descriptions of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's been a blast for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to get done with a full 3 books.
I know. It's crazy. It feels like we just started yesterday, and yet here we are 2.5 years later. It's been really fun to build this community and to start recognizing names.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like if you have commented more than twice, I probably remember your name or recognize it when it pops back up. And I feel like we're friends, even though we don't like talk regularly. But just know that like
we recognize you.
We recognize you guys, and
we
do feel appreciative that you guys are active in our little community.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said earlier on in the episode, we're going to be taking a couple weeks break. We'll be back with you for chapter 1. Well, no, prologue of Mad Ship, which is going to be probably a serpent chapter.
It is. It feels like a play, but worse. It's horrible.
Or not Mad Ship. Ship of Magic, excuse me. Mad Ship is book 2. So it's like a play, but worse.
Well, to be fair,
I like reading plays, okay?
I don't like reading plays, which is funny because I had to do it a lot in undergrad, but I don't like it. It's not my favorite, and that's probably why I don't like the serpents, because that's how I'm introduced to them, is basically in play format. So that is a choice, and in my opinion, not the right one.
Enter serpents stage left.
Exit Emma stage right.